Out this Friday on the spending bill and next Friday on that conference bill on tax reform. We'll see. One option folks are talking about, guys, is the House could just say, all right, Senate bill's good. Let's just do it. They could get that done by tomorrow. But my guess is it won't happen that way.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, right.
All right. Thank you very much, Griff. We're going to talk to Kellyanne Conway. She's going to be with us just about a half an hour from right now. We're going to talk about taxes and all sorts of stuff because it was another busy weekend. In fact, we're also going to talk to her about this, how the President of the United States has taken on the FBI after it was revealed over the weekend that apparently one of the top investigator FBI agents, a fellow by the name of Peter Strzok, was involved in the Hillary Clinton private email server case. In fact, he was one of the agents who interviewed her. He was also in on the Russia collusion investigation.
The dossier.
And as it turns out, he's a Trump hater because the Inspector General at the Department of Justice found some of the text messages he was sending to his the woman he was having an affair with.
His lover.
Anti-Trump stuff, pro-Hillary. You can't do that when you're supposed to be nonpartisan.
Right. And Robert Mueller must have known about this on some level before he named him to the Mueller investigative team, but yet he didn't mind having an anti-Trump guy on the team doing the investigating. Is it enough to have Democratic donors on that list? They had to go the extra mile. So he is now out. But I just got to ask you, just factor in the logic. Do you really think he's the only one? Oh, no. Do you think he's the only FBI agent in a prominent position that seemed to have a pro-Hillary, anti-Trump bias?
Well, no. And I think that's why they were so secretive about it. They actually demoted him into the HR department months ago. And right. Devin Nunes from the House Intelligence Committee thought that was kind of fishy. He knew that this investigator had been moved off the case. This guy was a really big figure in all of these investigations, as you mentioned, Steve. So he tried to investigate. He got stonewalled. I think part of the reason is exactly what you're saying, that there is more there. And letting Nunes and those people in the House Intelligence Committee know that it's going to spur more investigation to see if there were other pro-Trump, pro-Hillary, anti-Trumpers.
Right. And we've seen some stories from administration officials about how Mueller has stacked the deck with a bunch of pro-Hillary, anti-Trump people in the investigation, but given donations and stuff like that. But it all comes down to, it could only be one guy. This one guy could be the only one because he's so key. When you look at it, apparently this guy, this Peter Strzok guy, was central to the issue of finding intent whether or not to prosecute Hillary Clinton under the gross negligence statute. And he's the one who said, man, yeah, there's no gross negligence there because she did not intend to break the law. So really, he was so critical on the Hillary thing, and now we find out he was critical in the Russia collusion case, but he's been fired from that. Now he's working in personnel because he broke the rules.
So he did that interview on July 5th on that famous weekend. They knew no one taped it, and James Comey didn't think he should be there. This guy was there. So you know that he's pro-Hillary, he's anti-Trump, and we also know that James Comey drafted drafted his conclusion before the investigation was done. So if you look at the President of the United States, you can understand his frustration, which is why he tweeted this out today, that last night, that's causing a bit of an uproar.
Yep, he tweeted, after years of Comey with the phony and dishonest Clinton investigation and more, running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters, worst in history, but fear not, we will bring it back to greatness. And then Comey responded with his own tweet. I want the American people to know the truth. The FBI is honest. The FBI is strong. The FBI is and always will be independent. That is a retweet that he sent out in early
Sounds pretty
June.
defensive.
Of himself.
Right. It sounds pretty defensive to me. And let's not forget, Mueller himself. I've never understood this. Look, I'm not, a law enforcement expert or a prosecutor, but it seems to me when your buddy, when your close friend is running the investigation, and Comey, just like this investigator, is involved in every single one of these incidents. He's the one that drafted the letter that you talked about prior to her even being interviewed. And I just want to mention another thing that I find really interesting about what's going on. Very early on, Representative Nunes from the House Intelligence Committee was calling out what he thought were unfair things going on. He was calling out the deep state. Deep state and Democrats went after him really hard, sidelined him, tried to discredit him, and in some ways he had to kind of take a back seat.
He did take a back seat.
He did. And I wonder if this new information that's coming out is really going to restore his reputation.
Well, unless this guy was sidelined, he never would have been agreed to. And we understand when we start in the show, now McCabe, the former acting director, deputy FBI director, and Strzok are now going in front of the Intelligence Committee to finally get these questions right to their face. And he's been asking for months. Even with Chris Wray in charge, appointed by President Trump, he wasn't giving this guy up.
Well, and the reason they did that was because the top Republican leaders in Congress had been saying, hey, the FBI, the DOJ, they're stonewalling. We're going to subpoena them, bring them in. Now they're going, hey, you don't have to do that because we're going to bring them up in front of you. Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida, who's part of the House Oversight Committee, he's troubled by the fact that there could be a partisan in a nonpartisan job.
If you look at the Hillary probe, remember all the things that were curious about it. Comey drafts the letter, exoneration letter, 2 months before she's even interviewed. You have all these crazy immunity agreements with all the Clintonites, which there was really no use of the grand jury. Comey edited his statement from saying grossly negligent, which is what the statute said, to extremely careless. So it was almost as if they bent over backwards not to make a case against Hillary. With the Mueller probe, I mean, they're just scorching the earth, finding whatever little ticky-tack charge they can find on anyone, even having nothing to do with Russia collusion. So when you see the lead investigator in both of those was a partisan for Hillary and was anti-Trump, it undercuts the legitimacy of both of those investigations.
So the president did have a broad sweeping tweet saying about the FBI, as you mentioned before, and it's got a lot of people bent out of shape because 99% of the FBI is as honest as can be. But you don't want to broaden, take a swipe at the whole bureau.
Well, this is the management. We're talking about the management.
So the president should have tweeted out to the management under James Comey, name those guys. But I just don't want all of them who we got a chance to know on a regular basis caught up in their dishonest. Because their sense today when they were at their breakfast table that the president just called them dishonest when they're sitting there with their family, when they're making very little money, doing incredible work for us.
And for all we know, it could have been those good FBI agents who alerted someone about who this guy was.
General.
Yes,
exactly. So anyway, it looks like things are going to be revealed if the case, if what we've seen so far, and now these guys are going to go up to Congress and do some talking, and maybe finally we'll have some answers.
That's right.
All right. It is now 7:10 here in New York City, and Jillian's back with more headlines.
That's right. Good Monday morning to you guys, to you at home as well. Let's get you caught up, starting with this Fox News alert and brand new video of the U.S. and South Korea kicking off their largest ever joint air exercise as tensions reach a boiling point with North Korea. More than 230 fighter jets and nearly 12,000 U.S. military personnel will take part in the 5-day effort known as Vigilantes. The joint drill comes just 1 week after North Korea tested its most advanced missile that may be capable of hitting anywhere in the U.S. A man charged in connection with the death of a 3-year-old girl will face a judge today. Earl Kimbrey, the live-in boyfriend of Mariah Woods' mother, is accused of hiding the toddler's body in a creek 25 miles from their North Carolina home. He has a long criminal history and claims to be the last person who saw that child alive. It's not yet known how Mariah died or who is responsible for her death. Former President Barack Obama's apology tour isn't over. This time, he's overseas in Paris, slamming President Trump for his handling of climate change.
I grant you that at the moment we have a temporary absence of American leadership on the issue.
His comments coming after President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord for economic reasons. That deal was signed under the Obama administration. The college playoff football scene is set, and Alabama once again sneaks into the Final Four. Defending national champion Clemson is number 1, followed by Oklahoma, Georgia, and Alabama. This despite the Crimson Tide not winning its conference championship game, and Ohio State, who won theirs, was bumped off the final spot. This will be the 3rd straight year Bama will face off against Clemson. The 4 teams all play on New Year's Day. You guys have a stake in any of those games? Anyone go to any of those schools?
I just hope it doesn't affect their studies.
I don't agree with you, Brian. That's the most
I just want to make
thing.
sure they're great state.
Yes,
They'll be great games. Very good.
They will.
Thanks, Jillian.
This time Clemson goes in as a favorite.
That's right.
All right, 7:12 now in New York City on this Monday morning. Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein from California says the walls are closing in on President Trump.
I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice.
Well, that's her point of view, but lifelong Democrat Alan Dershowitz doesn't see it that way. He's next to explain why.
And national anthem kneeler Colin Kaepernick gets honored for bravery by the ACLU, and he showed up.
The Judiciary Committee has an investigation going as well, and it involves obstruction of justice. And I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice.
Really? Is that the way it is? Democratic Senator and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein, who's being primaried, by the way, claiming she sees an obstruction of justice case forming against President Trump. Is there actually a case? Let's ask Harvard Law School professor, lifelong Democrat, and author of Trumped Up. It says still out right now, Alan Dershowitz. Professor, is she right? Do you see a case for obstruction building?
No, I don't. And I think if Congress ever were to charge him with obstruction of justice for exercising his constitutional authority under Article 2, we'd have a constitutional crisis. You cannot charge a president with obstruction of justice for exercising his constitutional power to fire Comey and his constitutional authority to tell the Justice Department who to investigate, who not to investigate. That's what Thomas Jefferson did. That's what Lincoln did. That's what Roosevelt did. We have precedents that clearly establish that. When George Bush, the first, pardoned Caspar Weinberger in order to end the investigation that would have led to him, nobody suggested obstruction of justice. For obstruction of justice by the president, you need clearly illegal acts. With Nixon, hush money paid, telling people to lie, destroying evidence. Even with Clinton, they said that he tried to influence potential witnesses not to tell the truth. But there's never been a case in history where a president has been charged with obstruction of justice for merely exercising his constitutional authority. That would cause a constitutional crisis in the United States, and I hope Mueller doesn't do that. And Senator Feinstein simply doesn't know what she's talking about when she says it's obstruction of justice to do what a president is completely authorized to do under the Constitution.
So let me get specific. For example, going up to the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and saying to Senator Burr, hey, guys, can you wrap this up? Where are you at with this committee? Can you wrap this up quick? Is that obstruction?
Of course not. The president has the authority to speak to Congress, tell Congress what he wants to do, and Congress has the power to say no. We have separation of powers. You can't have obstruction of justice by each party to separation of powers exercising their authority. Look, the president could have pardoned Flynn. If he were really thinking about trying to end this investigation, he would have pardoned Flynn, and then Flynn wouldn't be cooperating with the other side. And the president would have had the complete authority to do so, and Flynn never would have been indicted, never would have turned as a witness against him. So I think the fact that the president hasn't pardoned Flynn, even though he has the power to do so, is very good evidence that there's no obstruction of justice going on here.
Right. I think you need people, some channels are hoping to see this, and some senators are trying to go
over.
Right.
And over reality.
Yeah.
And the other thing they're claiming is that by the president trying to influence foreign policy during his transition, for example, by having Flynn talk to the Russian ambassador Kislyak and say, please either vote against the UN resolution or delay the UN resolution. Somehow that's wrong. That was the right thing to do.
Gotcha.
I think he did absolutely the right thing by trying to stop the president lame duck from tying his hands.
Professor. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Joining us from Miami. Meanwhile, 20 minutes after the hour, the NFL paid $90 million for social justice causes, but it didn't stop players from protesting again on Sunday.
Good Monday morning and welcome back. Time now for your news by the numbers. First, 200 points. That's how much the Dow Industrial Average is expected to soar as investors react to the passage of the Senate's tax bill. The Dow futures rising past 24,400 with a potentially big day coming on the floor today. Next, $113 million. That's how much money Puerto Rico's governor is handing out in Christmas bonuses to government employees. That's according to Bloomberg. This despite asking federal taxpayers to shell out $94 billion for hurricane recovery efforts.
That is cool. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, the NFL's multi-million-dollar bribe to stop players from protesting is backfiring. At least 25 players either sitting, kneeling, or raising a fist during the national anthem during Sunday football games.
All right, this comes after the NFL agreed last week to commit $89 million to the so-called social justice program and those causes in hopes of stopping the protests.
Well, our next guest says that payout is just a big political stunt. Joining us right now to discuss is national spokesperson for the Committee to Defend the President, Amanda Head, joining us today from Los Angeles. Amanda, what do you mean that close to $100 million payout is just a political stunt?
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. So this was basically a bartering tool that the NFL used in a more casual sense. They said, OK, we're going to donate this money. If you guys please stand. OK, guys, please stand. And they kind of got the shaft all the way around because, as you said, 25 players were still kneeling or some sort of, fist in the air or something yesterday. So the NFL players are basically saying, yeah, we'll take your money, but we're going to kneel on it.
So, Amanda, $100 million is a lot of money. And in my opinion, social justice causes is sort of code word for Marxist causes, organizations probably that just encourage minorities and inner city kids to think they're victims versus empowering them.
Yes, and that victimhood mentality is number 4 on my list. I was going to talk about the top 3. The top 3 problems that I feel are the most important in the black community, which I don't think any of this $90 million is going to touch. It's black on black crime. It's the fact that 3 out of 4 children born in black communities are born to single parent households, and also the exceedingly higher dropout rate. These are the things that they ought to be addressing. But I really don't think that any of this money or much of it is going to go towards that. But if you want to take it one step further for these NFL players, if they want to do something more specific to help these causes, this was predicated on police brutality. That was the first issue that was raised, and that's been carried out throughout the entire season of this. So, all right, players, so why don't you drop out of the NFL and join law enforcement? But they're not going to do that because that would require them to remove themselves from the pedestal from which they pontificate to us average Americans, pretending that they know better than we do.
What's your reaction to the ACLU naming Colin Kaepernick, giving him an award last night? He actually showed up for it, for risking losing his job. Here are his comments from the dinner. Do you agree with... Do you agree with what he's doing? Do you put it in the Frederick Douglass category?
I don't. And, unfortunately, I'm not really surprised by this. I'm disappointed by him continuing to be awarded for his prostrate behavior, to use a biblical term there. But it's not really all that surprising because the ACLU is not really known for diversifying their pool of, people who receive awards.
Amanda, Frederick Douglass also said it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, which goes to your point that this would have been better. This money would have been spent better going to programs that help build up the black family, which is so broken right now.
Yeah, we need 2-parent households. All of these black players, I know that they like to hold pop culture figures up as well as other athletes. So Tupac Shakur did an interview in the 90s where he talked about how he would have been a much different and better man if he had had a father in his household. And at the root of all of this, it comes down to the breakdown of the family, which doesn't exist to the degree that it used to in black communities.
All right. Amanda, we thank you very much for joining us today to talk about your op-ed and so much more.
Thank you, Amanda. Still ahead, an illegal immigrant off the hook in the death of Kate Steinle for now. But what about the sanctuary cities protecting him? The acting director of ICE, Tom Homan, here to answer that, coming up.
And the TV network ABC suspending Brian Ross, the reporter, for his report on Michael Flynn that had some giddy on Friday morning.
Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yes!
Wonder if she's going to have a retraction today. We're going to talk to Kellyanne Conway, counsel of the president, about that. Straight ahead, live.
27 minutes before the top of the hour. There is so much going on at the White House. Now that the press Christmas party is done, they can focus on their agenda. Because that was the big hurdle.
Rachel said they've got a big party for the members coming up midweek.
On Tuesday, I'm going to the White House, so you guys aren't the only ones invited.
But she's going to a ball.
Oh, yeah.
Right, there you go.
Yeah, they didn't call yours a ball?
No, they didn't call us a ball.
Sorry.
But we had a ball.
A reception. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, counselor to President Trump. Kellyanne, good morning to you.
Good morning.
We just heard the music taking care of business, and with this tax cut bill, it takes care of the corporate tax rate, it looks like, around 20%. However, the president over the weekend kind of insinuated maybe he'd be okay maybe with it 21, 22%. What's going on?
Well, the House bill has it at 20%. The Senate bill has it at 20%. We're very comfortable with those two provisions. We'll see what the House and Senate do in reconciliation. But the president wanted it to be 15%. Remember, he was the one saying take it all the way down because he knows that would unleash even more prosperity, more growth, more jobs, more wage hikes. So it's at 20%. We're very comfortable with that. And let the Senate and the House do their business now in reconciliation.
All right, let's talk about what the Department of Justice and FBI is going on now. The FBI was not cooperating with the House Intelligence Committee because they're trying to find out about this investigator, not only former acting director McCabe, but this investigator, Strzok, who evidently was at the hub of almost every major investigation, including the interview with Hillary Clinton on that July 4th weekend over a year ago. So now we find out that he has an anti-Trump agenda, pro-Hillary, and it was in texts. This is one of our leading FBI agents. Do you sense, Kellyanne, this is a one and only FBI agent with an anti-Trump agenda?
It's so disturbing and troubling because you're right. He was at the heart of the investigation into Hillary Clinton. We know that she lied numerous times. We know that she bleach bitted and deleted 33,000 emails. We know that a lot of a majority of Americans in all polling said that she was neither honest or trustworthy. It's part of why she lost. And yet you do hear people constantly asking, when will she be held to account? I know she's got a pretty bad fate of not working and living behind me here. But this is what frustrates people. And now this revelation that a decidedly, definitively anti-Trump FBI investigator was involved in the Hillary Clinton interviews, as the president says, is now starting to make a lot of sense. And of course, this is in the context of never-ending investigations here of the Trump transition, of the Trump campaign, of possible collusion, which, of course, the president said as recently as Saturday simply does not exist. So it's very frustrating to many law-abiding Americans who look up and always see a double standard, always see special exceptions for Hillary Clinton. Look, the Clinton Foundation doesn't even exist anymore, which also means they're not taking gazillions of dollars from countries that don't respect women and girls. Wink, wink. But it's very disturbing to folks. And who knows if there's more. I'm glad they took action and got rid of this guy. But a lot of damage had already been done because Hillary was under investigation by the FBI. We're also seeing now more information being released about that famous tarmac meeting that wasn't just about golf and grandchildren, we would imagine, between then Attorney General Lynch and President Bill Clinton, the only President Clinton we'll ever have.
Right.
People want to know. So you talk about golf and grandkids for maybe the first 3 minutes. What was the rest of the conversation that lasted nearly an hour? So there are many questions, and anybody who's watching right now, those people who watch TV for a living, which is curious, and type about what we're talking about and say they just can't get rid of Hillary Clinton. They can't stop talking about Hillary Clinton. No. We can't stop talking about Hillary Clinton because she just never goes away.
Kellyanne.
She's legitimized by the mainstream media. Now we find out the FBI had pro-Hillary, anti-Trump people at the heart of the Hillary investigation. Very troubling.
Kellyanne, we just found on Friday, Brian Ross from ABC filed a report, a bombshell report, saying that Michael Flynn was going to be working or testifying against the president. And then we come to find out that it's fake news, that the conversation they were talking about happened after he was elected, before he was put in place. Tell us about that and any expectations you have that the apology and the suspension of Brian Ross is going to get the same attention that the fake news bombshell did.
It's getting no attention, even from his own network. I read they have a tip sheet every morning. It's called The Note. And the headline today says reality check. And I said, wow, ABC News is going to admit this grievous error that lasted for hours and hours before it was, quote, clarified, then corrected, then retracted, then he was suspended. But so many in the media had relied upon that report, that false report, blatantly false report by ABC News' Brian Ross. And actually, that report still existed when you had the media press party here, ironically, on Friday. If he worked for me, I wouldn't say 4 weeks suspension without pay is enough, because this is the heart of the entire year. Every network, the cable stations, the mainstream media has obsessed. The Democrats on Capitol Hill, they've done nothing this year. The only accomplishment the Democrats have this year is holding up and saying stop, resist, obstruct, no, and Russia, Russia, Russia. So it's not enough, because it goes to the essence of why 14% of Americans have a favorable impression in the media. And Brian Ross was not pushed back by the anchor either. There's one male anchor left on network morning TV, and I was disappointed because he's a responsible journalist.
Right.
He should have pushed back and said, hold on, wait a second. Are we breaking news here?
For the
because
folks,
that doesn't make any sense.
Right, Kellyanne, for the folks who missed it, the bombshell was that then candidate Donald Trump during the campaign told Michael Flynn, go start dealing with the Russians. And then they came back and said later, well, he told him to do that after he was elected. But I saw the tweet from the president over the weekend talking about how many people lost money in the stock market because of that. And there was no clarification until after the market closed.
And let me make very clear, Steve, this is a good point because that was noted by many mainstream journalists who I think felt burnt. They said, hold on, this isn't just a slip of the tongue. This isn't a, we all say things sometimes that are slips of the, you should have had the word not. And the fact is, this wasn't just a slip of the tongue. The markets moved. I offered to have a guest on ABC News' Sunday show. They didn't want anybody from the White House, but Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat, got about 10 or 12 minutes all to himself yesterday to hypothesize and do what he does best, go on TV. This president has been investigated, or his transition, his campaign investigated all year long. You can't even get the networks. MSNBC didn't even cover the Kate Steinle murder verdict, not a single moment, according to your own graphics. Maybe if she'd been murdered in Moscow and not Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco, they might have thought to cover it.
Kellyanne,
so this is why people don't trust a lot in the media.
Right, Kellyanne, real quick before we go. John Dad said over the weekend that he tweeted for the president. Does that happen a lot where other people tweet for the president?
Yeah, well, yes. In terms of the lawyers are the ones that understand how to put those tweets together. I was with the president on Saturday all day, frankly, and I know that what Mr. Dowd says is correct, that what he says is that he put it together and sent it to our director of social media. And I think what's happened since is very important. I went back and reviewed the whole testimony of Sally Yates, then the acting attorney general, when she testified earlier this year to Congress. I think it was to the Senate, an exchange with Senator Graham and others. So I would commend everybody go back and look at that because she makes very clear in sworn testimony what she did say and what she didn't say to White House counsel. And this is an active investigation. I won't say much more about it. But I will tell you that, remember, we were promised collusion from the campaign. We were promised that the results, those 70,000 votes in those 3 states, were all because of Russia, Russia, Russia. And now they're going in other directions. But this president says that, it's a shame anybody lies to the FBI and that there's no collusion.
All right, Kellyanne Conway, on the north lawn of the White House, I hear the helicopter approaching on the south lawn. The president's leaving in 18 minutes.
On his way to Utah.
He is indeed. All right, Kellyanne, thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you. God bless.
Thanks, Kellyanne. 18 minutes before the top of the hour, still ahead. An illegal immigrant off the hook in the death of Kate Steinle for now. But what about the sanctuary cities protecting him? The acting director of ICE, Tom Homan, here to answer and maybe have breaking news on this.
It is the verdict that shocked America. An illegal alien deported 5 times was cleared in the 2015 murder of Kate Steinle in San Francisco.
All right, so how does this impact sanctuary cities and the president's quest to rid our country of them?
Here to weigh in, acting ICE director Tom Homan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Tom, when you heard the Kate Steinle verdict, what did you think?
Well, I actually sat there stunned for a good 15, 20 minutes. It sickened me. This isn't the America I grew up in. For a city to knowingly release a public safety threat back into the public is just ridiculous.
So, but you have it, and it's beyond Kate Steinle, isn't it? Your biggest concern is other sanctuary cities and the fact that these cities are using judges to push back on the president's push to deny federal funds to those cities who have these illegal sanctuary cities, correct?
Yeah, isn't that ridiculous? Let's think about this for a minute. Sanctuary cities, they're suing the Department of Justice to get their funding from the federal government. So they want to fund sanctuary cities to keep illegal aliens in, but they don't want to fund a border wall to keep them out. To me, that's backwards.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting to me. You look at the Democrat reaction to it. It's been either, ho-hum, they're not even reacting. I think they think this is a good strategy for winning over minorities. I happen to be a minority director. I don't see this as a good strategy. I mean, minorities want safe communities. Minorities don't